It's possible I can't unsee that.
Can you hear me okay? Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining us today for Memorial Day 2023. We really appreciate all of you coming to this. It's a very beautiful day today. We've got great weather. I hope all of you can hear us okay with the speakers. We thank the City of Neuilly for their tremendous contribution to helping us ensure our ceremonies here are put on and perfect, really. Today we have a full lineup of folks speaking and giving commemorations. We'll start off with Rick Jones, our Vice Commander of Paris Post 1. He's also President of Weiss. Second will be Monsieur Lestan, Adjoint Maire of the City of Neuilly. And then we'll have Philippe Sechet, President of the Souvenir Français of Neuilly, and he also serves as our representative with the City of Neuilly for Paris Post 1. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Monsieur Lestan, Deputy Mayor of Neuilly. Monsieur Sechet, Representative to Neuilly and President of the Souvenir Français. Madame Crosley, President of the Paris Post 1 Auxiliary. Ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the American Legion Paris Post 1, I want to thank you all for being here today. History is a really funny thing. There's so much of it that we can pick any 2 points and probably pick some dots to connect it in some way. I've attended a few Memorial Day ceremonies at this mausoleum, and I've heard variations of the story of the mausoleum. Today I'd like to tell you the story from a slightly different perspective. Most of us grew up in the shadow of World War II, although as I look around I can see several people here I know who grew up in World War II. And when we think of the Franco-American military alliance, we tend to think of Americans storming the beaches of D-Day, plowing through the hedgerows of Normandy, etc. Despite World War II's large place in our minds, though, many historians will tell you that World War I was actually a more important war. One historian I'm fond of following says, many of the problems we face in today's world are because we're still ironing out the wrinkles from World War I. And as we all know, World War I was the first time American forces came to Europe to fight alongside the French. And for many people, that's where it all began. In fact, our alliance with France and our shared spilled blood goes much further back. It goes back to the American War for Independence. French involvement in our war for independence began in 1775 when it secretly started shipping supplies to the Continental Army. The King of France at the time, Louis XVI, wasn't ready to overtly support the American colonies. He wanted to see if they could prove themselves first against England, which at the time had the largest known army in the world. So he allowed French playwright Pierre-Augustin Caron de Beaumarchais to establish a company that on the surface was a simple trading company, but underneath was shipping war supplies covertly to the American colonies. Weapons, gunpowder, blankets, other supplies. At the same time, French ports allowed American ships, including the Continental Navy, to reprovision and rest there. France also provided technical assistance. A number of its military officers went on vacation so they could assist the Continental Army. In large part because of France's assistance, in October 1777, the Americans secured an overwhelming victory against the British at the Battle of Saratoga. It's been estimated that France had supplied 90% of all the materials that the Continental Army used during the campaign of Saratoga. When news of that battle finally arrived in France, France officially acknowledged the United States as an independent nation. It It was the first major European nation to do so, and the second in the world after Morocco. Shortly thereafter, the Treaty of Alliance was signed between the United States and France and Great Britain. It was more than just treaties and supplies and diplomacy, though. The French also fought alongside us. Over 2,000 Frenchmen died on American soil supporting our war for independence. French naval actions at the Battle of the Chesapeake in September 1781 blocked British ships from assisting their land forces, and this in turn led to the decisive Franco-American victory at Yorktown in October of 1781. This effectively ended the war. When British General Cornwallis surrendered at Yorktown, his vanquished troops marched through a corridor formed by the victorious forces, the Americans lining one side of the corridor and the French lining the other side. This is a scene that mirrored how critical France's support was to our war for independence. And today there's a monument in Yorktown, Virginia, to the French. It's got the names of hundreds of soldiers, French soldiers, who died on American soil. And there's an ongoing project to discover more of those names to put on the monument. Finally, in September 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed, which officially ended the American Revolutionary War. But the story doesn't end there. It was over for the Americans, but it was far from over for the French. The French government had accrued a significant amount of debt as a result of its support to the American war. The debt's been estimated at about 1.3 billion livres, which in today's currency would be about $250 million. This debt was a significant causal factor in leading up to the French Revolution. It was not the principal cause, but it contributed significantly to France's tenuous economic situation, which was a principal cause in the revolution. And so in 1789, a series of events occurred that we now mark as the beginning of the French Revolution. And on 21 January 1793, Louis XVI himself paid the steep price of the revolution when he was guillotined. The revolutionary government lasted 10 years until Napoleon Bonaparte came to power in 1799 with the coup d'etat of 18 Brumaire. Soon thereafter began the First Empire and the era of Napoleonic Wars. That all came to an end on June 16, 1815, with Napoleon's defeat at the Battle of Waterloo. With the fall of Napoleon, the European powers, the major powers, eager to find peace and stability in Europe, convened the Congress of Vienna to establish a balance of power among the major European powers. Now, up until this point, the Congress of Vienna, it's possible to connect the dots and draw a line from Louis XVI's decision to support the American colonies to the Congress of Vienna in 1815. There's no such direct line from the Congress of Vienna to World War I. We could almost say the trail goes cold, but it doesn't quite disappear. Rather, it becomes more of a dotted line. The reason is that many historians argue that the Congress of Vienna laid the groundwork for World War I, both by commission and omission. Specifically, it created a series of alliances that encouraged countries to build up their militaries. This led to an arms race and made it more likely that war would eventually occur. It ignored the principle of nationality and instead created borders that often divided ethnic groups. There were things the Congress of Vienna didn't do, but also contributed to World War I. It failed to address the issue of imperialism, which was a major source of tension between European powers. And it failed to create a system of international law that could help resolve disputes. Again, not one of these things could be said to have caused World War I, but they helped create the environment that enabled the war. So our line that began with Louis XVI in 1775 doesn't quite disappear, but it takes a bit of imagination to follow it through the 19th century. The story picks up back again in June 1917, when, 136 years after the Battle of Yorktown, the first American troops arrived in Europe to once more fight side by side with the French. That chapter of the story lasted 17 months and ended on November 11th, 1918, the day we now celebrate as Armistice Day. When the war ended, the troops from the European nations were by and large able to go home, to get on trains and go home. That was not the case with Americans. The Americans were traveling home by ship, and that was a very different proposition. It took months to coordinate and arrange. By March 1919, 5 months after the war had ended, there were still thousands of U.S. troops in Europe waiting to go home. And during this waiting period, the soldiers, sailors, and Marines found themselves in unfamiliar surroundings and limited support and resources. The leaders of the expeditionary force recognized the need for a collective organization that could address the challenges of these servicemen and provide for their well-being. Thus, the American Legion was born on March 15, 1919, in Paris. And 9 months later, American Legion Paris Post 1 was established. This was the first overseas post of the American Legion. The history of Paris Post 1 is too long and detailed to even summarize properly. Part of that history, though, is this mausoleum, which houses the remains of almost 300 American veterans and a few of their wives. It's a complex story, but in brief, after World War I, as American veterans began dying in France from other than war injuries, their remains were sent to local cemeteries scattered throughout France. Many of those graves had a 10 to 15-year concession, and at the end of which the remains were to be destroyed if the concession couldn't be renewed. This did not sit well with the American Legion. And in 1937, Paris Post 1 raised 50,000 francs and purchased a plot here at Neuilly. The city of Neuilly donated an additional 100 square meters. In 1938, construction of this mausoleum began, and in early 1939 it was finished. Additional monies were provided by American Legion headquarters in the U.S., and the remains of legionnaires began finding their way from the various plots around France to this mausoleum. This mausoleum has been and remains a living monument. If you pay attention long enough, you can hear its heartbeat. It beat on June 7th, 2018, when the remains of Legionnaire Edward Olsack were interred here. It beat again this year on January 6th, when the remains of Janine Wilson, the French wife of Legionnaire Denzel Wilson, joined her husband's remains here. And eventually it will beat again. Almost 250 years ago, King Louis XVI of France made a decision to help the American colonies. It only takes a little imagination to connect the dots that followed from that decision through the battles of Saratoga and Yorktown, through the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars, through the Congress of Vienna and the eventual outbreak of World War I, through the creation of the American Legion and the establishment of this mausoleum, and to our being here today. In a very real sense, this mausoleum represents the brotherhood and sisterhood that the French and American people have shared for almost a quarter of a millennium. And with that in mind, it would be, to borrow a phrase from Abraham Lincoln, altogether fitting and proper that when we lay our wreaths here in a few minutes, we keep in mind that at some point this weekend, over 6,800 kilometers to the west and across the ocean, other wreaths are going to be laid. Those wreaths will be laid in Yorktown, Virginia, in honor of the over 2,000 French soldiers who died helping America become America. And just as we in the American Legion are committed to never forgetting our own dead, we should be equally committed to never forgetting the French who died to help us become who we are. Thank you.
Thank you for those words, Jones. In the name of the Mayor of Neuilly, Jean-Christophe Corentin, and all the members of the City Council, I'm very proud to be among you for this 2023 Memorial Day. I will just focus briefly on a link between Neuilly and the American militaries. Maybe some of you don't know about this event, but dating back to the First War, in 1917, the brand new at that time Lycée Pasteur was transformed into the ambulance of the American Army, and many militaries, American militaries, were transferred to this high school, Lycée Pasteur, and were being taken care of both by nurses and doctors, Americans and French. And it's only at the end of the war that the first students got to get into this high school while it was finished to be built just before the First World War. So this is another link between our two countries, our two people. Of course, you reminded us that a little later, Neuilly in what we call the new cemetery, even though it's not that new, but strangely enough, it's out of Neuilly, so it's not on the real property of Neuilly, but we needed an additional cemetery because the old cemetery was too small. And up behind this famous office district of La Défense, we have the new cemetery in which this mausoleum has been built and is very well taken care of. So congratulations for all the efforts which have been lasting since the construction of the mausoleum. So once again, I'm very proud to be here. The name of the city of Neuilly, and of course we will be here, alongside the American people and the American Legion all the time you need, and that you can count on us. Thanks a lot, and proud to be here again, and long life to the American Legion.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In front of the prevailing battered moments, rife with instability that we are experiencing in the present-day world, this day, rightly called Memorial Day, allows us to vividly remember of the unwavering links closely binding together France and the United States of America since its independence. This celebration, aimed at enhancing this Memorial Day, is a very example of an overt gratitude of France to America when recalling the steadfast contribution of the latter in sending military help to fully support France in the two major hellacious conflicts of the 20th century. It would be mostly unfair to skip this two-day time, as it would be mostly unfair to look away and turn a blind eye on this dramatic moment. These conflicts, which undermine and put back the progress, intend to encourage a steady settling for peace and democracy. This day, named Memorial Day, is a day to focus on when looking at the historic moment when the United States and France were acutely adamant to come to terms to broker a four-square agreement for the good of both countries by settling principles on which can be established order. Also, a day to focus on, while bearing in mind the multifaceted internal problems that the King of France, Louis XVI, again in keeping in mind, and his trusted minister, the Count of Vergennes, had to cope at that time, while Washington had to battle with his counterparts to win over their endorsement. As testimony of gratitude for what these towering figures have achieved for our benefit, we are going shortly to lay a wreath of flowers at the foot of this mausoleum to enshrine the expression of our free and fair friendship for the future times to come and beyond. Thank you very much. May God bless you all.
Whoa.
Thank you very much for joining us today. The first Memorial Day in France was in 1920. Thank you for celebrating 103 years of American Memorial Day in France. It really means a lot to us and to all the families, especially those who are buried here. If you could please join us after this for a little bit of socializing and enjoyment. We'll be going up to the Suresnes Cemetery for the next ceremony today. And prior to that, across the street, there's a park and an overlook. So we'll be heading up there to have a little bit of sunshine and snack before the next ceremony. And we hope that you all can join us. Thank you very much for joining us today. The wreaths and the national anthem too. Wait.
Thank you.
would you mind helping me with some rings? Okay. You can come back this way.
Alors, vous venez avec moi pour déposer les fleurs.